Hello, my name is Victoria Winland. I am presenting John Leland in the Mammoth Cheese as partial fulfillment of the Crown College of the Bible Graduate School ED 510 Educational Leadership class. The purpose of this presentation is to examine John Leland's leadership skills from the standpoint of his advocacy for religious freedom. Elder John Leland was instrumental in influencing two presidents, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, in his pursuit for religious liberty and its protection by the United States Constitution. The Bill of Rights, with its guarantee for religious and civil liberty, represented a personal victory for him. John Leland was an American Separatist Baptist pastor with unique leadership abilities. He preached in Massachusetts and Virginia during a crucial moment of this country's development. Leland was for religious liberty because he believed no bureaucrat could stand in for a person's soul at the judgment seat of Christ. Researchers are hard-pressed to find information about John Leland in encyclopedias, comprehensive histories, or bibliographies, even though his contributions to the progress of religious liberty and the development of the separation of church and state were major. All his arguments were grounded in his understanding of the gospel and how the church should function. During his ministry, John Leland exhibited spiritual, transformational, authentic, adaptive, and spiritual leadership skills. John Leland was born in Grafton, Massachusetts on May 14, 1754, and died in Cheshire, Massachusetts on January 14, 1841. His parents were Congregationalists heavily influenced by Calvinism, and believed that each congregation should independently and autonomously run its own affairs. This idea would later influence Leland and his thoughts about the separation of church and state. John Leland was one of 7 children. In his autobiography, Leland recounts his baptismal experience at the age of 3. He was greatly terrified and ran off when he fell down a hill and bloodied his nose. It was all in vain, since the maid caught up with him. All the merit of this transaction I must give to the maid who caught me, my father, and the minister, for I was not a voluntary candidate, but a reluctant subject forced against my will. At 5 years old, he started reading the Bible and expressed a thirst for learning. Leland said that the Bible was his best companion. He commented that he never gained the goodwill of his teachers because of poor manners. It was said by his teachers that John has more knowledge than good manners. John Leland was not formally educated, but he did read extensively in the areas of theology, church history, and politics. As he grew older, he began to think about the follies of his youth. As a youth, he led a wild life until at the age of 18, he heard a voice saying, "You are not about the work which you have got to do." Like Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus in Acts 9, Leland accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as his Savior and set about to do his will. The last time I heard those sounds, I stood amazed, and turning up my eyes to the heavens, it seemed that there was a work of more weight than a mountain which I had yet to perform. Elder Noah Alden of Bellingham baptized John Leland and 7 others on June 1, 1774. Leland believed in free grace and settled on becoming a Baptist due to his agreement with the Baptist understanding of baptism being for adult believers only. He went to a meeting at Grafton on June 20, 1774, and since there was no preacher, he felt the Lord's leading to preach. He spoke for half an hour and knew this was what God wanted him to do. I finally surrendered and devoted my time and talents to the work of the ministry, without any condition, evasion, or mental reservation. He joined the Bellingham Church and they ordained him. They provided him with a license to preach and supported Leland in October of 1775, when he went to Virginia for an 8-month preaching trip. He returned to Massachusetts and married Sally Devine on September 30th, 1776. They eventually had 9 children. After his marriage, Leland returned to Virginia in March 1777 and took a position as a part-time pastor at the Mount Pony Baptist Church. He soon left them because he was too young and roving to be looked up to as a preacher. Leland moved to Orange County, Virginia, where he helped to establish 2 more churches over the course of 14 years. He held many positions of responsibility among Virginia Baptists. John Leland moved back to Cheshire, Massachusetts in 1791, and for the remainder of his life resided on the family farm. For the next 49 years, Leland would travel thousands of miles preaching the gospel. He preached almost 8,000 sermons and baptized 1,278 people. His wife Sally died in 1837, but Leland continued to work calling himself a Bible evangelist up until his death in 1841, when he contracted pneumonia and did not have the strength to recover. Leland wrote down what he wanted on his tombstone. Here lies the body of John Leland, who labored 67 years to promote piety and vindicate the civil and religious rights of all men. It should be noted that during his ministry, Leland wrote many hymns, including "Oh, When Shall I See Jesus?" and "The Day is Past and Gone." Baptists suffered discrimination and maltreatment in colonial America. John Leland used spiritual leadership by playing a substantial role in James Madison's election to the Virginia Ratifying Convention in March 1788 and to the First Congress of February 1789. John Leland made the decision to support Madison after a meeting between them occurred in the summer of 1788. Leland promised Baptist political support for Madison's congressional campaign in return for Madison leading an effort to amend the new Constitution by adding strong protections for religious freedom. God gifted Leland with natural and spiritual abilities. Spiritual leadership blends natural and spiritual qualities. John Leland used spiritual leadership to encourage members of his congregation to use their support to have James Madison elected. Leland utilized the values and sense of calling and membership to motivate his followers. Madison remained true to his word and led the charge for ratification of the U.S. Constitution in late 1778 and early 1779. James Madison became the major force in the passage of the Bill of Rights through Congress. Madison had come to believe that not mere toleration but complete equality and the right to worship was the surest guarantee of religious freedom. Virginians had freedom from taxation for religious purposes and had the right to worship freely by 1779. Religious groups were the political muscle behind the adoption of the First Amendment. The best example of John Leland's transformational leadership is the gift of the Mammoth cheese delivered to President Thomas Jefferson on January 1, 1802. The cheese measured more than 4 feet in diameter and 13 feet in circumference, 17 inches in height, and weighed 1,325 pounds. The crust of the cheese was painted red and stamped with Thomas Jefferson's favorite motto, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God." Leland had encouraged the Baptist and staunchly Republican citizens of Cheshire, Massachusetts to celebrate Jefferson's election. Transformational leadership has an additive effect. It moves followers to accomplish more than what is usually expected of them. Cheshire was a small farming community, and the creation of the cheese was a gift to Thomas Jefferson to celebrate his victory over John Adams in the election of 1800. Leland had announced his idea for making the cheese from the pulpit, and the congregation enthusiastically endorsed it. His vivid language and homespun humor engendered his popularity as a preacher. Leland made a political point of not using slave labor or Federalist cows. The cheese was made using 900 Republican cows and free-born farmers. It took a month for John Leland to get the cheese from Massachusetts to Washington, D.C., and it attracted enormous public attention. It was a perfect opportunity for Leland to preach to the crowds that turned out along the route to view the Mammoth cheese. Thomas Jefferson personally received this most unusual gift on New Year's morning. The gift of the Mammoth cheese presented by John Leland was an opportunity to show his authentic leadership ability. Authentic leaders understand their own values and place followers' needs above their own, and work with followers to align their interests to create a greater common good. Creating the cheese allowed the Cheshire farmers to contribute their talents and goods while highlighting their small agricultural town. It was reported that they sang hymns and prayed as they added their ingredients to the cheese. This was not only a gift, but also a symbol to show profound respect for the president, who was in support of religious freedom, while giving the best their community had to offer. The colossal cheese symbolized political support among New England's religious dissenters for Jeffersonian republicanism. The new administration, and the president's celebrated defense of religious liberty. The cheese was prominently displayed and served at important Republican Party functions for 3 years before it was unceremoniously dumped into the Potomac River. President Jefferson supported religious liberty as shown in a letter to the Danbury Baptist Association, and it has become known as the Wall of Separation letter. Jefferson's letter helped promote the widespread disestablishment of state churches. This letter made clear his alliance and his special regard for the Baptists. The union between him and them was peculiar. He speaks in his letters with scorn, sometimes of other denominations, but in a mass of them there was not a word unfriendly to Baptists. After delivering the cheese, John Leland was invited to preach in the hall of the House of Representatives on Sunday, January 3, 1802, with President Jefferson in attendance. The Reverend Dr. Manasseh Cutler, a Congregationalist, was in attendance. He described Leland as a cheesemonger, a poor, ignorant, illiterate, clownish preacher, who bawled with stunning voice, horrid tone, frightful grimaces, and extravagant gestures. Dr. Cutler further commented, shame or laughter appeared in every countenance. Such an outrage upon religion, the Sabbath, and common decency was extremely painful to every sober-thinking person present. Leland was not formally educated, but his writings made references to those who influenced him, including Roger Williams, John Locke, and John Wesley. He filtered everything he read through the Bible. John Leland was especially talented when it came to encouraging people to adapt and face the challenges of the new nation. He knew this was not the time to sit idly by. Leland was intensely interested in religious liberty and also believed that as a good citizen he should stay informed of public matters. He paid special attention to any laws being passed that would take away religious liberties. There were laws that had been created to regulate personal behavior, commerce, and traveling on Sunday. These laws were meant to encourage people to attend their spiritual needs of worship and rest. In 1810, Leland challenged the United States Postal Service by advocating that it should be unlawful to deliver mail on Sundays, and the post office should remain closed on Sundays. A congressional committee chairman requested Leland to give his opinion on the subject that divided the whole country. This chairman proved Leland's adaptive leadership skills by reaching out to him concerning mail delivery on Sunday. Leland had a way of assisting people who needed to confront tough problems. Leland promoted a stance that became widespread among his political associates and resulted in public policy and national legislation. His friends and supporters considered his influence to be formative upon the outcome of the proceedings. The proceedings went Leland's way, and it was not until November 2013 that the post office began delivering packages on Sunday. However, you will still not find a United States Postal Office open on Sunday. John Leland did not have a love for money or wish to achieve great fame. He believed in preaching the gospel and not accepting state support. Leland objected state-supported ministers and their tireless dedication to fundraising and their incessant pleas for more money. He even composed a poem in which he denounced those ministers who served for filthy lucre's sake. As a servant leader, Leland was attentive to the concerns and needs of his congregation. He put his followers first and nurtured them. Both he and his wife were true servant leaders, as they showed kindness to the needy and never turned anyone away without aid if it was in their power to give it. This liberality, joined with the love of independence, which was always a predominant and cherished peculiarity of both Mr. and Mrs. Leland. They did not have many creature comforts, but what Leland did have he was willing to share. He was beloved by all those that he ministered to. Leland led a life of self-sacrifice, as he oftentimes left his wife and children for long periods of time so he could travel to spread the gospel. Charles Spurgeon wrote about servant leadership, saying, "We must be prepared to give up everything else. Our name, our repute, our friendships, our connections must all go without reserve if Christ needs them." There is no denying that America has been blessed by the hand of God. 1 Peter 5:6 Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. John Leland loved God and America. He wrote, "Nothing is more plain than that the Almighty set up the government of the United States in answer to the prayers of all the saints, down from the first proclamation of the gospel." His political stance was derived from his biblical convictions, as are mine. Leland earned the respect of his fellow Baptists and other dissenters as a champion for religious liberty. John Leland's leadership styles and his abilities to stand for truth against the government should be an example to Christians today. He stressed that obeying God's law is essential to the health and stability of the nation. He was not only concerned about upholding a constitutional guarantee of religious liberty, but also advocating the nature of true faith. I endorse Leland's godly boldness as something every one of us can emulate, especially in service as a cause of great and foundational as the right of freedom and religion or belief. John Leland proved that there is nothing wrong about religious participation in politics. Christian citizens are just like all other citizens, free to speak their minds and present their arguments without any filter based on their biblical beliefs. It is up to the Christians to take America back for God. Neither social order, moral progress, nor a Christian civilization can spring out of chance. While John Leland's contributions to protecting religious freedom are admirable, it is important to remember the souls he was able to lead to the Lord. He had a heart for the things of God, which allowed him the opportunities to serve the Lord in unbelievable ways. Proverbs 3:5 and 6 say, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." John Leland was an effective godly leader, as outlined in Ezekiel 34. He was a man of singular ability, independence, and possessed a strong moral character. His opponents could not only mock his lack of education, because nothing in his life could lend itself to criticism. John Leland should not be forgotten, and should be a part of everyone's education when studying the early Republic of America. May we all learn from his godly example. Thank you for listening. I have provided my references on the following slides.